I'm Becky Meagher, and welcome to Transitions. Transitions, we all have so many transitions in our lives. I like to use the metaphor of triathlon, something that I've been doing for probably 14 years. First you get in to swim, and then you get in a transition area, and then you get on your bicycle, and then get in the transition area, and then you run. And isn't our lives like that? We have so many things that we start doing that doesn't work, that leads us to another thing, And our guest today is Karlen Evins, an amazing woman who is so many different things. In fact, I hope you saw the other show that we have. We needed 2 shows just to explain about her amazing life. She has been a broadcaster, producer, radio show producer, also an author of very, very successful books, is also a divine science minister, and has a farm, has 40 goats and 5 big, fluffy Great Pyrenees, and that's just the beginning. So, Karlen, thank you for being here.
But I've never run a triathlon, so I have not mastered it yet. I'm really curious, what's the best part of the triathlon for you? Is it the running or the swimming or the bicycling, or do you have a part that you go?
All the above.
All of them.
Get
I'm just
an award
curious.
at the end.
I'd just like to ask you these questions, so it's nice to be here, Becky. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, on our other show, we talked a lot about your life, but I'm going to encapsulate some things because we want to concentrate on the more metaphysical parts of your life.
I want to know your history as well, because we met first through our church.
Right.
So.
Well, and we share the same church. So going from the beginning, from your religious beginnings, and you grew up in a small town in Tennessee. How small was that town? What was the name of it?
Alexandria.
Okay.
I was born in Lebanon, but my dad ran a small country bank in Alexandria, so every chance I got, I'd sneak away in his van and go to work with him in this very, very small, poor rural town, and just loved it. Just absolutely loved it, and went to the Alexandria Church of Christ. My mother was Southern Baptist, so I went to First Baptist in Lebanon for a while, and I also went to the Church of Christ in Lebanon and Alexandria. So I had the full upbringing of the fundamentalist faith, and went to Friendship Christian School, which my father had been on the board to help found. So I came by it honest, you know.
Wow.
And then later just kind of grew into new thoughts and experiences. So.
Well, it seems that and correct me if I'm wrong, the fundamentalist movement is not as open as, how do you say this? I would think it wouldn't be as open as I seem to see you are. But if you, like I was brought up Catholic, and there were certain rules, and it took me to go to college to go, I don't believe in all that. But it's a very nurturing kind of thing, and if you're in these fundamentalist areas, how do you go beyond that?
You know what happened? It was an interesting experience, and I've really not ever talked about this, but I had a dear lady who had basically raised me. She had been one of my dad's bank tellers, and when I would go to work with him as a little bitty girl, the different tellers would take me home at lunch and, let me play with their dogs or kids or whatever, and I became very fond of her. And so more I was in Alexandria, the more I loved it. And at one point, she developed cancer. It was an ovarian cancer. And she asked us to pray for her, and we did. And my dad, he was pretty fundamentalist Church of Christ too, but he went straight to the book and took it literally, like elders and oil, anointing. He wanted to not miss anything. And the church was like, no, we don't do that. We draw the line on that. And he did it anyway. And by the time she went to her next doctor's appointment, it was gone. And I was so convinced then, and it'd be hard pressed to change it for me, but that miracles do happen, and prayers are in the now, they're alive. And Church of Christ, no disparaging, I love my people, but it believes that the Word is the Bible, and that's where you go for it. And I'm like, what about just talking straight to the dude, And that really isn't so much the teaching as it is about going straight to the Word. I'm like, I gotta go straight to the guy for mine. I probably would have been an Essene if I'd been back in the day. So it was a very real experience for me, and one that made me say, these prayers aren't for naught. Somebody's listening out there.
Somebody's listening out there. And how old were you when that happened?
I was probably around 11 or 12.
Wow.
I was a
So
little impressionable.
this precious person in your life was very, very ill, and everybody prayed, and your dad did oils and whatnot, and helped the belief that she is well, and it worked.
So we held that belief, yeah. And that's very much what our teaching believes, that we know the perfect and whole being rather than the illness. So many of us focus on the illness. I know it's so terribly hard when someone goes to a doctor and they give you a bad prognosis. How can you not get your mind wrapped around that? You know, it's all you're thinking is, oh my gosh, this thing is eating in my body, you know. But to be able to hold the image of what truly is in our perfect and whole soulful being, to hold that takes a certain faith. It takes a certain training, I've found. It's not necessarily a natural thing. You kind of have to work to get there, but that's more in keeping with what our teachings believe now.
And when you say to our teaching, that's the religious science teaching?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And you know, I came upon that's really interesting. We were talking in the last show about Beyond Reason, which was the show that Teddy Bart began. We also did a political show called The Round Table, but Beyond Reason was this metaphysical show that he came up with.
It was a radio show.
It was a radio show, yes. And, you know, it was all about things like life after death and miracles and, you know, all these sorts of unknown things. And I had become a fan of a guy in Atlanta. My mother played bridge with a guy who was in California who went to this gentleman's church. His name was Kennedy Schultz, and it was a religious science church in Atlanta. And Mom's bridge partner would send these tapes of his sermons. And I was just so captivated. It wasn't the doctrine that I was used to, but I found nothing wrong. I found nothing not in line with the teachings. And it was a very practical version of spirituality, you know, not holier than thou, but, you know, you got to have help today. And then I found out that we had one of these churches in our own town, and Reverend Dr. Mitch Johnson had started it, and he was a student of Kennedy Schultz. And so when I found that out, I'm like, holy cow, I didn't know. And I first started going when they were over at the Y on Woodmont, I guess. Yeah. So I'm like, there's a whole bunch of like-minded people over here. I didn't know.
Wow.
So it was great.
So your mom was listening to tapes by Kennedy Schultz?
Yeah. She was kind of open-minded. My mom actually, she went to Scarrett and got a theological degree too. So
really?
She was into this sort of stuff as well. So yeah, it was just a growing time for us. My parents wound up divorcing, and it actually.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 16 when that happened, and I think they waited until I was at least old enough to drive and, you know, share time between them. But after they got divorced, I'm like, wow, we should have done this a long time ago. Life's a lot quieter around the house. There's a lot of yelling and going on. So, but I was thrilled to find that we had progressed enough in Nashville to have a church of this nature. And I've kind of been there ever since, you know.
And the nature of the church, the nature of your philosophy was molded, okay, back to you're in the small town, and then to speed forward, you went to UT, and that was probably eye-opening. And then when you decided that advertising wasn't for you, you decided you'd learn to hear what Teddy Bart was talking about Beyond Reason, and just showed up at
at one of his shows, yeah.
A show.
Just
showed up.
Was a participant in his live studio audience.
And just said, I want to work with you. And he said, no.
And I stalked him till he said yes.
And you said, okay, but I'm coming back. And you interned. And I think that's such an amazing story that you didn't, you heard no, but you didn't take no for an answer. Yeah. And you kept on, and that's 20 years. Now, my thought is 20 years of Beyond Reason. And tell us all the different people that was it weekly, daily?
It was daily.
daily.
We did it every
Guests
day.
would come in, and for people who don't know who a Wayne Dyer is, or I understand it. Kind of give us an example of the people you actually met through that show and learned what their philosophies were.
Yeah, we were in the day before, and they were really surprised to find a show of this nature in Nashville. After all, we are the buckle of the Bible Belt, and to find a host as open-minded as Teddy was to all this was pretty amazing. And they, would send notes after. This was before internet, so we would fax our confirmations, and have to go the old-fashioned way to get things going on the air. But we had everyone from Shirley MacLaine to...
Yeah, Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah.
You met Shirley MacLaine. What was that like for you?
We actually interviewed her on her second book, which was It's All in the Playing, which was her story about what happened to her after Out on a Limb. Because, a lot of Hollywood kind of shunned her after she came out, and they accused her of being crazy and everything else. And it was really fascinating because she was kind of doing a reflection back on what had happened. And just a very soulful person. And Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson.
Wow.
And, they were thrilled, I guess, to get a Nashville Bible Belt show that was open to it. And that's actually how I became an on-air co-host with it. We had lined up an interview with a guy named Kevin Ryerson. And Shirley MacLaine made him famous because he was her trance channeler in the Out on a Limb movie. And she would go to him, and he channeled 3 or 4 different entities. They had different accents and things like that. And we had got him all lined up for an interview. And we were we used to do this in Snaffle's Lounge at the Vanderbilt Plaza. And we got, we were getting the mics checked and everything, about to go on air, and his person comes on the phone and says, "We thought you were going to be here an hour ago." They got us mixed up with the time zone. They didn't know we were on Central. And Teddy's like, mic her up, I've got to talk to somebody. And so that was kind of my entrance into the whole talking. I was just producing up until that point. And so I just got on and answered his questions about what shows are coming up, Karlen. Who else are we talking to this week, So that was kind of roll with the punches. And he later laughed and said, "I bet you did that on purpose." I went, "No, I didn't. I was scared to death when that guest didn't show up." But he made lemonade out of it. He was good at that.
Yes. So did that guy ever show up?
He did. Actually, Becky, we brought him to Nashville. And I don't know where you are on channeled information, people.
I am an open book. I don't understand it, but
yeah. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and you kind of want to, take 2 and make sure if you're saying you're taking in somebody else's message through your own vessel. But Teddy had said, "I know if I can see him face to face, I know I will know." And so, if it was for real.
Right.
And so we brought him to TPAC. We sold out TPAC and had him on the stage, and Teddy interviewed all 4 entities that came through him. And after it was over, Teddy said, "I still don't have a clue," but he said, "I don't take issue with anything he said. Everything he said was spiritual and helpful and wholesome and healing." And at that point, I began thinking it's not about whether or not I believe they are moving their mind out to let somebody else in. It's about, is the content good? Is there something there that we needed to hear? Is the message worthwhile? And so I got out of the judging business on the channeling stuff, because we had everybody. We interviewed Jay-Z Knight, and she was really controversial. She was the channel for Ramtha. And she got into
channeler. The entity comes through her, and her voice changes.
And he was like from Lemuria or something, and there's no way to check her sources since he was, a 30,000-year-old entity. But she had gotten in some trouble because Ramtha had encouraged folks to invest in her horse farm, and wound up losing some money. So that's never good for business. But like Abraham Hicks today, that's channeled work, and I find what Esther Hicks is doing to be glorious. I find her messages to be very helpful. So it just depends on whether you can get over the hang-up of whose message was this, who originated it. So I just want to know if it's good.
So on these shows, it's broadening your horizon from this little town of 750, from Church of Christ, and then it's like you're growing and growing. Wow, there's all these other things out here. And then after 20 years, you left that, and then you decided to go to divinity school?
Well, I did that kind of in the course of things. You know, when you're on, especially in the political realm, everybody kind of sums things up in bumper stickers when you're in talk radio. You know, you size it up and you make it quick. And I just wanted to make sure my brain would work in reverse still. That, you know, you can take something on a 2-hour talk radio show and sum it up to change is good. And you take 2 words out of the Bible, like Jesus wept, and you'd write 25 pages on it. I just wanted to know I could go both ways if I needed my brain to work, like still do long math, you know, long division. So I had no intention of getting a degree. I just wanted to kind of stretch my brain and make sure I wasn't.
Knowledge.
Yeah. And then I hit the halfway point and said, well, I might as well finish. I've started. And so I took the slowest boat to China. It took me 2.5 years, and I think you can get those degrees in about a year. But I was taking one course at a time, paying as I go. And, but it was good. It was good for my brain. It was good for my soul. But then when our shows started to move around, all the stations changed hands and things like that, I decided that it was time to start writing and do something different, and kind of went on a silent sabbatical. And that was, are you familiar with Gethsemane? It's up in Kentucky.
Yes, this monastery that's up there.
It's beautiful. And they let folks like us, well, you're a Catholic, you could have gotten in, but they even let folks like me go. And it was Thomas Merton's place. He's
the famous Thomas Merton,
yeah,
a great philosopher.
And you can, even today, you can book time there. You can go for a weekend or 4 or 5 days in the week. And I just holed up and, you know, stayed there, and you do the silence thing. And I just found that as many voices as I was paying attention to outside of me, there were just as many inside of me wanting to be heard. And I had to kind of turn those off to find out what it was. So there's real value in silence. And it's something that I think today we're getting further and further away from. It kind of concerns me.
Right.
You know.
So you took a personal retreat. How long were you there?
Well, I was there for just whatever they allowed, like a week. But then I wound up going to one in Scotland where I stayed a couple of weeks. And, you know, I wound up just kind of touring monasteries for a bit. I was craving silence like a desert soul craves water, you know. I'd been through so much talk, and everybody's opinion was supposed to be yours. And, you know, just to stop and say, I don't know that I even have an opinion on this. I just want to stop and listen to where my soul is right now. It was a sudden and abrupt change, but it was a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of souls, we do have your book here. I didn't know that comes from the Bible. And you also had other books that you wrote during, I guess that was snippets from when you did the radio show. I didn't know that, Why We Say the Things We Say, All Gussied Up, Under the Weather, that kind of thing. And we explained on the other show that you had sold like 50,000 copies self-published. Amazing. But this one, the Bible, quotes from the Bible, is there anything in there that you particularly like that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, it's a funny story. These books are now back under my ownership. I have the rights to them. But there was a stop along the way with Simon & Schuster. And I had gone up to New York to speak to some group they wanted me to speak to. And after it was over, the publisher came to me and said, is this a Christian book? And I went, well, it's a clean book. It's not, you know, but there's nobody preaching at anybody. We're not saving souls or anything. And she goes, we've got the Christian marketplace wanting this book, and I want to know why. And I said, well, because it's clean. And I understand that Christian bookstores now want to be able to sell you other things besides just the Bible to stuff stockings with. And she said, okay, that's fine. But she said, I said, why don't I just do a Bible book for you? You know, I've got the wherewithal. I think I can sit down and make a list. And so I went back to my toughest professor at Vanderbilt and asked her if she would be my editor of it.
Miss Levine?
Yes, A.J. Levine.
A.J. Levine.
So she was
dynamic woman.
Yes,
dynamic.
I was asking you earlier if you were familiar with the phrase, and we say it a lot here in the South, like land of Goshen. Land of Goshen, I'd heard that all my life when you know, kind of say it, went, oh my goodness. And there really is a land of Goshen, and it was from when Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers after, and his father was so upset. He brought his father and his brothers over into Egypt, and there was a place that they let their sheep and cattle. It was the nicest land in the place. It was the land of Goshen. It was right beyond the Nile, and it was a very fertile valley. And so to find out that that was scriptural and not just a Southern saying that we said was, yeah, it was very, very sweet. So we had a lot of fun with it. And there are a lot of phrases that people were thinking was in the Bible, but aren't in the Bible, like spare the rod and spoil the child is not a direct quote. You know, so it was just fun to kind of put the
research
and put the truth to it and say, yeah, don't be quoting that and thinking you're getting away with it. Don't be acting so smart there. It might not be right.
Wow.
But it was a lot of fun,
Yes.
fun pulling that together.
So you have been an author, and then also part of your life, which we didn't go to, that you had bought an old church and redid it.
I live in a church, yes.
And you live in a church, and we have some pictures of that, which is amazingly beautiful. I've been in it. Magnificent stained glass in it. It's magnificent. And then you are living on your farm.
Yes.
And that is a peaceful place. And I was just out there, and you have the 40-some goats and the 5 big fluffy white dogs. And tell us about how that is, it's metaphysical place for you, is it?
I don't know what drove me, and I like to say my 30-something self was thinking ahead for my 50-something self, but I just got it in my mind shortly after college that I wanted to take a church and turn it into a writing cabin. Because where I came from, churches went belly up all the time. You know, it was usually over a preacher or a piano or something, but a church would split, and then neither of the splits could sustain a whole church, and so you'd wind up with someone who would wind up with an empty building before it was all said and done. And so I had asked my dad to keep an eye out for whenever one happened. That's not how I found mine. I'd actually gone home for Christmas with a friend of mine and saw this beautiful clapboard, kind of Gothic style country church with a brand new one right next to it. And I thought, I know what they're going to do. They're going to move all the benches, pews, and pulpits out over and move it over here. They're going to knock this one down. I'm going to try to get it. And that wasn't exactly what they were going to do, but I did get it. Turns out that was a Presbyterian and this was a Baptist church, and they had a long history together. But I wound up securing, it took a year and a half to figure out if you wanted to buy it, who would you talk to? And they had to pull their presbytery together and the like. So we managed to negotiate that. I brought it home in tractor trailers. But you know, Becky, now that I've been in it, in the first 10, 15 years I was visiting it, and the last 5 I've been living in it full time.
Last 5 living
So
in
just
this
have not had
place.
time to keep a Nashville place and the like, and I want to be there. My animals are there.
Right.
But I've had more and more folks asking to come visit, or is there a way I can just come stay for a little bit? And so first I built a little apartment over my barn loft, and then I just recently completed a tiny home. So I've decided that between now and whenever God calls me home, I'm going to turn it back into a spiritual retreat. I don't plan to put the pews back in place and make it a fundamental church again, but I think she's always wanted to be a place of spiritual growth and perhaps worship. So I'm going to leave her back to the planet when I'm done living in her.
So you'll honor that it will be open for a retreat center, perhaps.
Yeah, for others to enjoy.
For others.
It does have. I've had writers and artists and folks like that come out, and they're very fruitful. Things happen. Like, it's just a vibe here. It's like, yeah, well, I think that came with the church.
So with it, fruitful meaning they're creative. They come up with ideas.
Songs
they write
get written,
songs.
and book ideas come out of them. So
yeah.
You can't bottle that up. You got to make sure that you got a pass to come anytime you're starting to think you need to create something. This is the place to do it. So yeah.
So at this point in your life, you have this beautiful farm. You have been raising
goats,
vegetables,
oh,
goats,
yes, gardens.
right?
Yeah,
Gardens.
gardens and goats.
And what do you see as the future for you?
Well, in addition to working on the spiritual retreat aspect of it,
Of your land.
of my land, it's just 15 acres. It's very small.
And you've talked about spiritual boot camp?
Oh yeah, we have that, and that's with some of the folks from our organization, but it's separate
From
and
religious
apart
science?
from religious science. Yeah. Well, after the, and not to go political here because that's not what this show is about, but after the elections of 2016, I just was so distraught by the division among people. You know, I mean, I'd been in talk radio where Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, you just loved them all. You know, you rolled your eyes at some things and tolerated other things, but I'd never seen it like this. At the time, Mitch Johnson was our minister, and I went to him and said, I need to reinforce my spiritual beliefs so that I don't fall prey to this, because it's real easy just to arm wrestle your family at Thanksgiving over something stupid you heard on the news. Like, I don't even want to be around mine right now. I'm just so, and so I, you know, just put out the call, and I call it, it's like an AA support group for the politically frustrated. And so we've been meeting now for about 2.5 years, and we get together and we'll spend a few minutes going over, can you believe, and did you see, and, you know, we got to do that. And then we wrap it up and go, okay, enough of that. And then we come back in and say, now, what can I do? What will I do when this comes out, or what, you know, or when somebody comes full circle and, you know, realizes that they may be back the wrong pony or whatever, and, you know, how can I be gracious? Or if it's my pony, you know, how can I be gracious and understanding? Because the togetherness of us is what's going to make or break us. It's not the leadership, that's questionable, but whether or not we as a country can find ways to come together and stay together.
Right, if you focus on the derision, you get more of it.
Exactly.
You know, it'll just increase. So focus on the love, and whatever your political thoughts are, love.
Exactly.
Trumps everything.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that.
It's a word, it comes out. Yeah, exactly.
Right, right. Wow. Well, it sounds like you have a paradise where you live. And being in your house, I would say it's a monument to your creativity, moving a whole church and making it absolutely beautiful, and then having your little tiny house and being open for what's next. You have such a background, and we didn't even go into all the cookbook you've written, and I think there might be in the future another cookbook from your garden. Maybe more healthy, supposedly.
You know, someone asked me, can you do a healthy Southern cookbook? Because they're so full of butter and flavor and
all the good fat
comfort food.
stuff.
We call it for a reason. And so the first couple of cookbooks I did in cooperation with Cracker Barrel, and I went, if I were going to do a totally healthy one, I would have to start with the seeds. I would want to know how it was grown, and I want to do it from scratch. And so I decided I'll just learn how to do that. It was easier said than done, but.
Well, I know we want to hear more, and stay tuned. There may be a third show, and thank you very much,
Thanks
Karlen,
for having me.
being
It's
here.
really fun to be with you, Becky.
Yes, and that's it. Transitions, body, mind, spirit. All right.
Knock them out the park.
We could do a third one. There's just so much.
I'll come back.
She'll come back with more stories. I'll tell you, we just touched the surface. There's so much.